Yo, what's going on, you guys? Your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to all my brothers out there, all to my subscribers out there, man. Tonight we got Game 2 of the NBA Finals between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns, with the Phoenix Suns leading the series 1-0. Later on in the afternoon, I'll give you my analysis of Game 1 and what I expect from Game 2 tonight. So, in the midst of all the stuff that's been going on around Phil Jackson and the whole Scottie Pippen thing, originally I did I pretty much put a post up there, pretty much criticizing Pippen for making that statement about Phil Jackson, saying that there's some racism involved between the two in their terms of their relationship. Now, after a bit of close examination, after I got a little bit, I got some assistance from the OG LVZ that basically put some information out there that I was not aware of. There might be some smoke to the fire when it comes to Phil Jackson. And what I'm talking about is that there was a book that he wrote called More Than a Game that was written back in 2001. This was at the time when he was still coaching the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, this article right here on Basketball Network, still is on Phil Jackson's side of things, but there were some things in the book that they put in this article that really drew my attention, that really said to myself, really, there might be some smoke to this whole thing. Now I'm going to read you some quotes from the book that pretty much illustrates some of the things that maybe that Scottie Pippen may be talking about that could be possible that we might see in his biography book that's going to come out in October. So here goes. Jackson was always a very intellectual and spiritual person who knew what made different minds work and what motivated them. He soon recognized the difference between black players and white players in his book More Than a Game. He explained how he saw the different upbringings impacts how they play basketball. Now here's the quotes from the book that he put in there. Quote: White players are more often willing to run patterns and to work collectively. Because of the predominance of blacks in pro basketball, the sport is rapidly disintegrating into a one-on-one sport. There are only 5 or 6 NBA teams who play with more than a superficial degree of team unity. Really, Phil? Hmm? Let's continue. And this is the article part. The demeanor of black players have is that they need to prove to everyone that they are the best and the most accomplished, because sometimes that is the only way they can escape from their harsh reality and even poverty. According to Jackson, white players on the other hand usually tend to navigate for more teamwork because that's how most often they were brought up in their communities. Really, Phil? Now here's another example from this quote from the book. Quote: Black kids growing up want to be the superstar of their neighborhood. They want to be the toughest kid on the block, the richest, or once they get into the playground, the best one on one basketball players. White kids, on the other hand, are usually raised in a more homogeneous environment in which provides other outlets for more personal expression. Really, Phil? So let me get this straight. You pretty much want to say that basically black players are more about individuality to play than just team unity than white players are not. Then how can you explain the fact that Jason Kidd is one of the top five leaders in assists, and he's and also a black person too? Let's keep that in mind here because his one of his parents is black. Also Gary Payton too, who was one of the best point guards in the '90s, preached team play. During his time with the Seattle SuperSonics. Even Magic Johnson, one of the all-time greatest point guards in the game, with the 5 NBA championships, never saw him thinking about more than just about himself. He was more about the team and had to take over the reins as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, entered in age during the mid '80s. And also Bill Russell, one of the greatest winners in the history of the game. All right, preached team unity more than anybody on that team, considering the fact that he also had players that pretty much played to that same philosophy. So Phil Jackson, to me, sounding like to me that Phil thinks that white players play more of the team game than they do the individual game, which is not always the case. All right, if that were to be the case, why is it that the fact that Larry Bird, was one of the top 5 leaders in scoring and still were winning championships? You telling me that that sometimes he played for himself a little bit most of the time? Come on, man. That to me does that right there does not make any sense whatsoever. And I'm sitting there like, maybe people need to read some of the stuff that Phil Jackson's saying before they jump the gun on Scottie Pippen. Now, I'll be honest. And initially, when I did the post, I look at things from a basketball perspective. Now, does that mean that Pippen did not have his faults? Yeah, he had his faults in terms of the contract, or in terms of the way that he handled the 1994 conference semifinal game against the Knicks on that last possession when he refused to come off the bench. That doesn't mean that. But at the same time, I think we need to have little bit more of a closer examination of the two relationships and think about how maybe they weren't as close as many people think they were. You know what I'm saying? And I'm starting to think right now that all three of these guys, both Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, probably were not as close with each other as they tend to be. Even though despite the fact that they were successful in winning 6 championships in the '90s. All right, the way that Phil Jackson approached the things to certain people, you know, some people didn't mind it, and then there were other players that probably much didn't like what Phil was doing, especially during the Laker years when even when they were winning championships. At some point, players get tired of your act, they get tired of your methods, and it just starts rubbing off the players the wrong way a lot. And so, I think that the mass media right now needs to have a little bit more of a closer examination on this because right now the way I see it, they're jumping on Scottie Pippen heavy. I mean, jumping on the Phil Jackson defense very heavy, while at the same time bashing Scottie Pippen here. I think we need a little bit more of a close examination about what Phil Jackson does and some of the words that he says, because sometimes hidden undertone racist, lines tend to be missed out a lot. And I will admit, I look at things from a basketball perspective. And sometimes when I look at things from a basketball perspective, sometimes you're kind of oblivious or unintentionally miss some of the things that people will say most of the time in the heat of competition. And so I think we need to give some benefit of the doubt to Scottie Pippen on this before we really jump to conclusion of the whole situation here. And salute to LVZ for pretty much bringing up that point because you could work with somebody and have no problems with them at all, but it doesn't mean that that other person does not have racial undertones or thoughts or even a philosophy in their minds as you're working with each other. All right. You don't think that Red Auerbach has some things in his mind about black players too? You know what I mean? Other than Bill Russell. So I think we need to slow down. I think we need to have a bit more of a closer examination about what Phil Jackson does for his players before we jump the gun into his defense. So that's just my 2 cents on the whole situation. So, but the quotes on there, you can find it on basketballnetwork.net. All you got to do is type it on Google Phil Jackson, white basketball players, and the article is going to be right there, right in front of you on the very first link. In fact, I'll do yourself a favor. I'll put the link to the article in the comment section below so you can read it for yourself. And also, and another thing too, in terms about the Scottie Pippen book that's going to come out, um, the book on guard is going to be released in November, I should say. It will be released in November, and so I'm going to do myself a favor. I've already pre-ordered the ebook of the biography of Scottie Pippen. So we're gonna do is I'm gonna read the book and I'm gonna closely examine all the stories about Scottie Pippen. You know what I mean? I wanted to hear more of the practice stuff, the stuff in between, the timeouts on the bench, the hidden conversations with Phil Jackson's, Michael Jordan, Jerry Krause, some of the things that were not seen a lot in the Last Dance documentary. And so we're gonna see about that. And so I'm gonna make sure when the book comes out, read it very thoroughly and also get a close examination about the whole situation because I'm starting to think right now that there's a lot of stories within that team, despite the fact that we were successful winning championships, that there was a lot more to the fire about this team that people tend to realize than it was originally reported. So that's just my 2 cents about the whole thing, you guys. Salute to the OG LVZ for bringing up this information. You know what I mean? And I will say I stand corrected on that situation, and then we're gonna see how things will turn out. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. With that, I'm out. Peace.